A very special guest tonight. Her name is Lacy Lowe. Another false accusation case regarding bogus claims against a parent for sexual abuse that is undeniably untrue. Yet, the children are still in foster care, of course. In January of 2012, a friend of hers said that her daughter was being sexually abused. Shortly thereafter, her daughter told her sister, and then her, that she was being sexually abused, but wouldn't say by whom. Well, she goes to the doctor immediately, like any other good parent would do, gets her tested. The test showed no trauma, no sexual intercourse had taken place, but the doctor had to call CPS. She understood. She said that's fine, and she agreed. Well, it's been a living nightmare ever since, so hopefully we can get to the bottom of some of this tonight. All right, we've got our special guest on now, so let's bring her on here. Lacy, my dear, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, I guess we've got some echoing problems and whatnot. Looks like it's gone now. God only knows. I don't know. But first of all, I want to thank you very much for coming on board with us tonight. I'm sure this cannot be easy for you, but
No, not really.
maybe for you speaking out, maybe you might inspire another parent out there who is afraid to speak up. So they can speak up, because there's a lot of people that just they're afraid to speak up. So I applaud you for that. So.
Well, it's rough, and I have to admit I was kind of fearful of doing so myself. But people really need to understand what is actually going on out in the world. They don't understand until you're put in that position to where you have to go through something like this.
Yeah, and you know what they've done is they've got these parents, especially these young girls who, 19, 20 years old. Just because you're 19 and 20 years old and you're a single mama doesn't make you, less of a human being. But they have got these girls so frightened and so scared. They've got total control over them. It's sickening. It's absolutely twisted. So hopefully somebody out there is listening that is in a predicament just like you. They feel the need to stand up and rise up and speak out, because that's what it's going to take. American people still don't really know what is actually happening out there. They really don't.
Right.
So anyway, let's start here now. Let's take us back, if you will, when your nightmare began. That happened in what, January of 2012? Is that what it was?
Yeah. Yes, that's correct.
What happened?
Well, my sister had taken my daughter for her weekly visits with my sister, and she was staying the night. And the next morning, my sister gave me a call and said, are you busy? Can you come by? I really need to talk to you about something. I was like, okay, what do you need to talk to me about? And she goes, well, I don't really want to get into this over the phone, but I really need you to come by so I can talk to you. And I was like, all right, well, I'm just a few minutes away. I'll be over there in about 10, 15 minutes.
Right.
She said, okay. So I get to my sister's house, and she pulls me outside, and she says, well, your daughter, I'm not going to mention names right now if that's okay. She says, your daughter just told me something that I'm very concerned about. I was like, well, do you want to, get to the point and tell me? She goes, well, she's telling me that she is being sexually abused. I was like, what do you mean she's being sexually abused? She goes, I don't know. All I know is that her demeanor over the last day has been completely different. I was like, well, what do you mean? She goes, she's been very quiet, and when I've been talking to her, she's given me one-worded answer. She's not really talking to me, and I finally got it out of her, and she started crying, saying that someone was touching her. I was like, well, what do you mean by touching her? And she's like, I don't know. She won't tell me. She just tells me that somebody is touching her. So I kind of put a stop to that at that moment, and I went inside and I sat down with my daughter, and I was like, can you tell me what's going on? And she told me the exact same thing, that someone was touching her. And I was like, well, what do you mean touching you? And she goes, someone is sex assaulting me. And I was like, honey, do you know what sex assaulting means? And she said no.
How old is she at that time?
She was 8 at that time.
Yeah,
she had just
8 years
turned
old. 8. They don't. That had to come from an adult.
Exactly, and I'm trying to figure out where she's even coming up with this word, because in my home she's never heard of anything like that. And the only one that I could think about was the fact that she was around my friend's daughter a few weeks beforehand, and she was telling me that her daughter was getting counseling, that she had an ongoing investigation. She was involved with one of the detectives by our local police department, and the only thing that I could think of was that my friend's daughter was talking to her about everything that was going on, and this is how she come up with this word, because I've never used this type of language around my daughter before.
Right.
So it really concerned me. Exactly. I'm trying to figure out, where is all of this coming from, because she's never exhibited any signs of anybody hurting her in any way. Settle down. Go play. Sorry. I got my son right here.
That's all right.
So anyways, like I said, I'm just trying to figure out, what is going on here. So after I had that conversation with her, I stepped outside and I told her to stay right there and finish watching her cartoons, and I stepped outside and I began calling her doctor's office. I sat on the phone with her doctor's office for about 2 hours trying to get somebody to answer my call and put me through so I can make an appointment. They finally answered after about 2 hours, and I told them briefly what was going on, and she asked me if I could be there in 15 minutes. I told her that I could, so we got there within 10 minutes after that phone call. And once again, I approached the desk, and she asked me what I needed to be seen for, and I was like, well, I just made a phone call, and I went into a brief description, considering that there was people behind me, of what was going on. So she walked away from the desk and she went into the doctor's office, where they have a medical behavioralist that works right there at the clinic. And she comes walking out and she pulls me into her office and she asked me again what was going on. So once again, I explained to her what my daughter had just told me and what my sister had just told me. And she goes, okay, well, I'm going to tell you something right now. We do have to make a report, regardless of what the examination shows. We do have to make a report because of the nature of your visit here. We have to inform CPS of what was going on. And I said, okay, I completely understand that. So she took me back to one of the examination rooms with my daughter. Another nurse came in. Once again, I had to tell them what was going on, why we were there. The doctor finally came in, and I was able to discuss with him what was going on. He explained to both me and my daughter while we were in the examination room of what needed to be done. At 8 years old, she did not completely understand what was going to be happening. So he stepped out of the room, and he asked the medical behavioralist to come back into the room so that way he could have a witness to the examination being done. Right. Which at that point in time, I completely understood. I wanted as many witnesses there as possible, so that way, this being a male doctor, I was kind of hesitant after just what my daughter just had told me.
Right. She might, if it's true, she might get some kind of, flashback of some sort, that makes sense.
Exactly. Right. So he did the examination, and he was, as he was doing the examination, he was explaining to me what he was doing, what he was seeing. Of course, my daughter's listening into everything, and she was holding my hand pretty tightly because I think she felt very uncomfortable with what the doctor was doing. But I told her that it was okay, that he's just doing an examination, and this is the only time anybody has to do anything like this. And the examination took maybe about 5 minutes, and he said that he didn't see any trauma, he didn't see any lesions, he didn't see any masses. At this point in time, he couldn't even tell if her hymen had been broken. I'm kind of thinking to myself, how can you not tell if that had been broken or not? But he said
that was my question. He's a doctor. Look, you can tell if that hymen has been broken. That's number one. A doctor,
right? Exactly.
And 5 minute examination. That seems a little short.
Yeah.
Right.
that's kind of what I thought myself. I was like, okay, well, is there anything else that we need to do? Any further examinations that we need to go through? He said no. He's not even recommending us going over to the emergency room because doing a rape kit is not going to tell us any more than what we just went through. And I was like, okay, so what is the next step then? He goes, the only thing that I can do is send this report over to Child Protective Services, and within the next couple of days, a caseworker should be out to start an investigation, and hopefully they can get this in and out and case closed. I was like, okay, so what do I do in the meantime while I'm waiting for a caseworker to show up? He goes, there's really nothing that you can do. I mean, if she starts exhibiting more signs or is experiencing any trauma, then I would suggest bringing her in and having her speak with some type of behavioralist or some type of trauma therapist. And I was like, okay.
All right. I hate to interrupt you here, but I mean, I'm just, hypothetical. If a little 8-year-old girl was to come in, if I was a doctor, I'm not, but if a little 8-year-old girl was to come into my office and claim, she was, touched, and if this really was a legitimate case, and if they're going to report that to CPS, why aren't they reporting it to the police? I mean, it seems like this is a criminal matter. I mean, rape is a criminal matter, last time I checked, and especially with a child. I mean, it seems like, why would you have to wait 2 or 3 days for these people to come do an investigation? That investigation should have been done immediately, right then and there. The police should have been.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Right there.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I was expecting a police officer to walk in or some type of caseworker during the time that we were sitting there, from the time that we got there up until our session with the doctor had ended. I was expecting a police officer or some CPS worker to come walking in and say, can we, go somewhere to talk about this situation? And none of that had happened. I waited a week after that examination for somebody to come knocking on my door or a phone call or something, and none of that happened. I have the doctor's report from that day, and they also gave me a copy of the report that they made to Child Protective Services and the person who had took that report, and that was it. That was literally it until the end of March, when the detective in my friend's case called me and said that he got my phone number from my friend, and he said that he needed to interview my daughter because she was a possible witness in their case. And
this is in March? This is in March?
Yes, this was nearly 4 months after.
That's a little, I don't know how to quite put that, but I mean, you've got an 8-year-old child here. If you're really concerned, 4 months later, that's unacceptable.
That is very unacceptable, and and still to this day, I keep asking them, why did you guys wait 4 months for a detective in a separate case to come to me to investigate this case? You guys should have been out immediately when you received that report to investigate and find out what is going on with my daughter. Yet I did not hear a word from any of you guys, and yet still to this day, they have not provided me an answer with that.
Because they don't have one.
Exactly.
They dropped the ball is what they did. They dropped the ball, and they're trying to cover their butt, so they're removing their child. Make it look like they were actually doing something. So what happened at that point now? You got 4 months later, an officer calls you up, and what happened?
So I told him, I was like, well, I don't really know how she can be a possible witness to the case. The only thing that I know was that she came to me and showed me a note that her daughter had wrote to her saying that she was being sexually abused. That is all I know. I was like, we spent a little bit of time over at her house during the time that she claims that she was being sexually abused. And I explained to the officer, I don't know how my daughter can be a witness. He goes, well, we just need to talk to her and see if there's any information that we can get out of her that maybe you don't know or your friend doesn't know, and maybe she has some kind of information for me. I was like, okay, well, let me talk to my husband. going through a separation with my husband now. We're trying to get a divorce, but at the point in time, we were still married. So I told him, I was like, well, let me talk to my husband and see if we can't figure out a time to where we can bring my daughter up to do this interview. A week had gone by, and I kept pushing my husband on to, when can we do this interview? You need to let me know so we can get this done and out of the way. After a week, the detective called me back, and I told him, I was like, look, we're just trying to figure out a good time to, do this interview. Well, he got a hold of my husband, and they had a conversation that I know absolutely nothing about. Supposedly, later on, I found out that the detective had very suspicious concerns regarding the conversation with my husband. And again, I don't know what that conversation is. I have never heard the recording, and it was supposedly recorded between the two. But to this day, I don't know what that recording says. So he decided that we needed to do this interview right away. I was like, okay. So between the detective and my husband, they scheduled a time for the detective to come and pick up me and my daughter and take us to the CAC interview. And, well, nobody had given me any indication of how this was going to happen. When is the detective going to call me to have us picked up? None of that information had been relayed on to me. The day that it was supposed to happen, I was not home because, again, nobody gave me that information on what time I needed to be home for them to come pick me up. So the detective said that he kept calling me all that day. But during that entire day, my phone was on, my phone was working. I did not receive one phone call until about 4 o'clock in the afternoon when I got a voicemail from a lady who supposedly works at the department and said that she had some concerns that she needed to address with me. When I received that voicemail, I called her right back. I got her voicemail. So I left her a message saying, I'm returning your phone call. I would like to know whatever your concerns are. I'm not sure who exactly you are. She never returned my phone call. The next morning, the detective called me again and said, why were you avoiding me? I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, I called you all day yesterday. Well, I didn't receive any phone calls from you. And so he literally got into an argument with me, telling me that I was literally avoiding him. I was like, I don't know where you're getting this information from, but I was not avoiding you in any means. I was like, I did not receive a phone call from you whatsoever. And what's funny is when he had called me, he had somehow rigged his phone to where my friend's phone number popped up on my phone instead of his phone number, which I didn't understand how that could possibly happen. But he did that anyway.
What city in Colorado are you in?
I'm in Loveland.
Okay, I've got relatives actually in Loveland. We had a question in the chat room. They wanted to know what department. That was the Loveland Police Department?
Yes.
Doing this? Oh, okay.
Yes. Very interesting because there's a lot of speculation that goes along with the Loveland Police Department. As this story goes on, it's very quite interesting. So anyways, he told me that, we really need to do this interview and we need to do it right now. And I couldn't understand why he was pushing so hard to have this interview done. I was like, well, I'm available right now. And I asked him if my sister could come along, and he goes, if she can be there within the hour that I pick you up, then that's absolutely fine. I have no problem with that. So I called my sister, and I felt really bad because I ended up waking her up. I was like, look, I really need somebody to go with me to do this process so that way I know that I can be supported in this. And so she was over at my house within the hour. And then the detective drove us all the way up to Fort Collins to do the CAC interview. We got there, and he stepped into another room to talk with, I'm assuming one of the ladies who work there. Shortly after that, I want to say it was about a half an hour after that, the lady comes out and she sits down and she talks with me and my sister about what the process looks like as far as them doing the interview on my daughter, that they would take her upstairs into a separate room to sit down and ask her some questions. I was like, well, am I allowed to go upstairs and be in the room with her? And they said no. I was like, really? Why am I not allowed to be in there with her? Because this is a conversation between me and your daughter, and we need to, we just need to get a little bit of information. And if you're in the room, that deters us from getting some of the information that we possibly need to know. I was like, well, I'm still not understanding, but I guess if I have no choice but to stay out of the room, I guess I have no choice. And it was very aggravating, and they could see that it was aggravating me, but they still would not allow me to go into the room.
I can see their point. However, you know what I mean? From a parent standpoint, I can see your point as well too. The reason why they want to do it, they don't want your daughter. They want your daughter, to be as candid as possible. But another part is they want to be able to manipulate your daughter without you being in the room to stop it. So, but I mean, I do understand, roughly why they're doing it. So, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. So, go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. So they eventually, after explaining this process to me, they eventually took her right back upstairs. And I think that they were upstairs for at least an hour before they came down and said that she was hungry, that they were going to grab a snack. I was, trying to find out how she's doing, all that type of stuff. They went right back upstairs after a few minutes. Didn't really fill me in on anything of what was going on other than the fact that she was just hungry. I was like, okay. So me and my sister were sitting there trying to figure out what's going on. The next thing we know, the detective comes walking downstairs with another guy, and he introduces this other guy as another detective. I was like, okay. Thought this was a little weird, and he asked both me and my sister if we could step outside so they could talk to us. So I was like, okay, what is going on? And I asked the detective that. I was like, what is going on? And he didn't answer me. He just said, let's just go outside so we can talk. So the detective who initially had called me, he took me aside. The other detective took my sister aside to one end of the yard, and I was on the other end of the yard, not being able to hear anything of what was going on. And the detective pulls me aside, and he looks at me. He goes, so how long has this been going on? I was like, what are you talking about? He goes, you need to answer me honestly and truthfully. How long has this been going on, and what do you know that's been going on? I was like, I don't understand what you're asking me.
Yeah.
After a few minutes, huh? Are you there?
Hello? Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Oh.
So after a few minutes of him looking at me, I was like, will you please just tell me what is going on? And he goes, well, your daughter just admitted that your husband's been sexually abusing your daughter. I'm like, really? And I just started busting out in tears. He goes, so how long has this been going on? I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, but I don't think he's been sexually abusing her in any way. So he continued, and he tells me, he goes, well, you need to call your husband, and you need to confront him and ask him why he's been doing this, and ask him how long he's been doing this. At this point in time, I couldn't talk because I was crying so hard.
Now, is your husband at the time, was that your daughter's biological father or stepfather?
Stepfather.
Oh, okay. Now, how was their relationship? I mean, that you knew. I mean, was it? Did they get along? Was he supportive of her? Was she ever afraid of him, or did you notice any kind of unusual relationship between the two?
I've never noticed any unusual relationship between the two of them. He was a part of my life since she was 2 and I was 19 at the time, is when he came into my life, and we got really close. We started off as friends, and then it eventually moved into an emotional relationship. So he's been a part of mine and my daughter's life since I was 19. She was 2. So here at this interview, she was 8 years old. So he's been a part of her life for 6 years at this point in time. They really did have a great relationship. He was rarely ever left alone with her, and most of that was because I was a stay-at-home mom from the time she was 4 up until all of this had happened. And he was at work all the time. He would go to work from 8 o'clock in the morning and sometimes not get home until 10, 12 o'clock at night, and getting paid really crappy, So he was gone pretty much all the time. So Yeah, so she was pretty much always with me. There was rarely ever a time where I would ask him to take care of her when he got home from work so I could go do something with my sister or run a couple errands or whatever. So, and there was times that I became really good friends with a couple of my neighbors. So there were times, whenever I would have to leave and I asked him to take care of her and watch her, he would just go over to one of the neighbors' house and sit there so that way she could play with their kids. So he was never actually really truly alone with her, and I never worried about, is something going to happen with her being in his care. I never had to worry about that ever.
You never saw him scream and cuss at her, be abusive towards her, or any of that?
He helped me discipline her, but he never did anything abusive. I would not. I was the type of person.
Normal discipline is. Yeah. You need that. That's different. Than, the abuse.
Exactly. But between the two of them, they would play around, like from the time that he would get home from work until the time she would go to bed, on those days that he didn't have to work until 10, 12 o'clock, he would be home around 6, 7 o'clock at night. So by the time he would walk into the door, she was all over him like, daddy, 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 daddy. It was always about daddy as soon as he walked into the door. And I didn't see anything unusual in that aspect. She really did love him. She looked up to him as this was her daddy. That was the type of relationship that they had.
Wow. So she called him daddy?
She did call him daddy. She didn't know her biological father because her biological father refused to have anything to do with us.
Typical.
Yeah.
So what happened then? I mean, how they call you and your sister out there now? They wanted you to confront your husband, and you didn't want to do it, and evidently your sister finally did.
It wasn't that I didn't want to do it. It was more the fact that I could not do it. I couldn't speak because I was crying so hard that they would accuse my husband and that they would accuse me of knowing of something like this going on. Why would they sit there and assume that I would know something horrible like this would happen? And he kept pushing me to call my husband, and I was trying so hard to even talk through the tears, and I couldn't. So he walked away, and he walked over to the other detective with my sister, and I don't exactly know what they talked about. I stood in that one spot, and I just kept crying and crying, and the next thing I knew, the detective took off with my sister somewhere, I don't know, and she eventually came back to me and said, I called your husband. I was like, well, when I could finally talk, I was like, what did you say? And she goes, well, I confronted him like the detective wanted me to. And I was like, well, what did the detective want you to say? And she goes, well, he told me that I needed to ask him why he did this and how long that this has been going on. And according to my sister, he was very angry when he received that phone call because as soon as he answered her call, she just started going off on him and cussing at him and yelling at him. And so, and to a point, I can understand his anger and frustration because he gets a phone call like this while he's at work. And so how are you supposed to react in that situation?
I've got a question. I've got a question here.
Sure.
Now, it just seems to me, now maybe because I'm a whack job, I'm crazy. I deal with things like common sense and logic and all that. So if there is an investigation going on with detectives, now, am I off base here? But doesn't it seem like the detective should have been the one contacting your husband and doing the interview instead of you or your sister?
That was kind of what I was thinking as well. I'm not understanding why he's pushing both me and my sister to call him and ask him why he did this and how long this was going on.
That just doesn't make any sense to me at all. That's their job.
Yeah,
that's their
it
job
didn't make any sense to me either. Yeah, I'm the type of person that I work on common sense and logic myself. If something doesn't make sense to me, I'm going to continue to ask questions until it makes sense to me. And nobody could answer me as to why none of this makes any sense. Still to this day, I am still trying to make sense of it all, and I can't seem to wrap my head around any of it.
Well, it sounds like to me that the decision was already pre-made before you even got into in there.
Right.
The decision was already made. It took them 4 months to come up with it.
Right.
You know? So what happened then? How your sister's talking to your husband? Obviously, your husband is just.
Oh, my husband was severely angry. Yeah, he was severely angry. He's like, I am at work. Where is this coming from? Why are you asking me questions like this? This is a conversation that I had with him later on because I didn't get to talk to him during that process of, while we were at the CAC interview. So after both the detective and my sister made that phone call and she was able to come back to me and I was able to talk to her, the detective came back over and pulled me aside and he's like, so this is the situation that's going on. We're having your daughter removed. She has already left the building. I looked at him. I was like, you bring my daughter back to me right now. And I was getting severely angry with him. I was like, you have no right to take my daughter from me. I don't even know what the hell is going on, but you have no right to do this. You need to bring my daughter back. He goes, if you continue on with this, I will arrest you for obstruction, for the fact that you knew that this was going on. I was like, I did not know this was going on. He was like, you need to bring me my daughter back right now. He goes, one more word out of you, Lacy, and I will have you arrested right now.
Oh, man. I cannot stand bullies with badges. I can't stand any kind of bully. I don't care whether you have a badge on, whether you wear a robe or the presidential friggin' seal. I don't care if you're a Walmart greeter. If you're a bully, you're a bully, and that's exactly what they were doing. They didn't even do their job. They never even once interviewed your husband, and they came to the determination, based on their manipulative interview, that your husband was guilty, and so they're going to remove the child. I mean, that doesn't even. I mean, that just seems. That's bizarre. I mean, did you ever get a lawyer at some point? I know. Yes,
as a matter of fact, I was given the lady who had called me the day before that interview had happened is the one who left a voicemail on my phone. She called me later that day and said that we had an emergency court hearing scheduled for that following Thursday. So we went into court that following Thursday, and of course, we didn't have the money for our own attorney, so we were told that we needed to fill out the paper for the court-appointed attorney. So we did that. He was appointed his own attorney. I was appointed my own attorney as well. Basically, the reason he was appointed attorney was because of the fact that the accusations came out against him, and most likely there is going to be criminal charges that he is going to be facing, is what they told me. And then that's what they also told him as well. So I was appointed pretty much a public attorney from that day forward.
Public defender is what they are.
Yeah, pretty much. So I've been working with this attorney for almost 3 years now, and I've been told over and over and over again that this is one of the best attorneys possible for a court-appointed attorney. I was like, okay, I don't know him, but I guess there's no other choice but to hopefully find out if he's one of the best or not. So let me tell you, I have had questions regarding this attorney because I honestly don't think he's done his full potential as representing me, knowing that I am innocent in this entire process, that I did not know that this was going on with my daughter, even whether the accusations are true or not. I did not know what was truly going on with my daughter. And so I feel to this day I have not truly been represented.
No. And another thing, I mean, when real cases like this do happen, and there are cases like this that actually do happen, the mother isn't going to know because the father is not going to sexually abuse your daughter in front of you. Right. It's just not going to happen.
Exactly.
I mean, God Almighty, do these cops? I mean, have they ever? I mean, where? I mean, it just seems like these these people that are in charge of our lives, I mean, they know absolutely nothing. I mean, how could they be so devoid of? I mean, aren't there classes that they have to take? Psychological classes. I mean, basic human psychology will give you a lot of the answers. That you don't have to be a psychologist or a psychiatrist or any kind of a professional to understand this stuff. I mean, again, you and me can understand it because we deal with common sense. That's all this really is.
Yeah.
So, did your husband ever get charged with any crime? Did they charge him at all? Did they ever arrest him for it?
They did arrest him a week afterwards. On April 12th of 2012 is when the caseworker had called me and said, well, there's a warrant issued for your husband. I was like, well, why are you calling me to tell me that there's a warrant? She goes, well, you need to call him and tell him that he needs to turn himself in immediately. It's like, well, isn't that your job to call him and tell him that?
Now they're making you do their work again. This seems a little... This is bizarre.
It is very bizarre.
They're like the Keystone Cops over there, for God's sakes.
Right. So after I got off the phone with her, I immediately called him and I said, look, she just called me and said that there's a warrant out for your arrest and that after work you need to turn yourself in immediately. And he goes, well, then you can expect me to get off work fairly early. I was like, well, what are you planning on doing? Are you going to turn yourself in? He goes, well, don't worry about what I'm going to be doing. I was like, well, I kind of need to know what's going on here. This is my daughter we're talking about. He goes, I know. She is my daughter as well. But don't worry about what I'm going to be doing. I will fill you in later. I was like, well, I'm not understanding what the hell's going on, but fine, whatever. And I hung up on him because at that point in time, I was just aggravated. All I wanted to know was what was going on with my daughter. I wanted my daughter home. So 7 o'clock comes around that same evening that the warrant had been issued, and this is on a Thursday, I believe. And so 7 o'clock comes around, and there's a knock on my door. So I go to answer the door, and there's two sheriff's deputies standing at my door. And I was like, can I help you? And he goes, one of the officers goes, is Colin Kane home? I was like, well, no, he was supposed to be home about an hour ago, and he hasn't. He goes, well, can we come in your premises and search to just make sure? And I was like, I guess so. He asked me what my name was, and I told him just my first name. I was like, I don't have to give you my last name because you're not here for me. So they go around the house and they search for him, and they're like, okay, well, the premises is clean. And one of the officers is standing next to my coffee table, and of course, I didn't think anything at the moment at the time, but I had a piece of mail sitting on my coffee table with my name on there. So the one officer who's standing by my coffee table runs my name. And I told the officer, I was like, well, I can give him a call and you can find out exactly where he's at. So at this point in time, I didn't realize that the officer was running my name from this piece of mail until towards the end of the conversation that the officer was having with my husband, trying to figure out where he is. I still did not know where my husband was, but they had an agreement that he was going to turn himself in within the next hour or two. The other officer that was standing by my coffee table, he said, well, there's a warrant out for your arrest. I was like, for what? And he goes, it's for a traffic-related case. And I was like, well, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know of any traffic-related cases. And he goes, well, it's an outstanding warrant that's been sitting there, I don't know for how long, but it was due to, I think, a driving offense. I was like, oh, crap. Didn't realize that a warrant had been issued for this driving offense. I thought I had gotten things taken care of. Well, apparently it turns out that I didn't. So I ended up being arrested that night because of that warrant. So it was a completely unrelated arrest for me, and I didn't think that was quite fair because he didn't exactly have the right to take a look at my property. No. And I've been told that regardless, I allowed them into my home so that they were allowed to do whatever they want. And I was like, that doesn't seem fair or right at all.
No, even if they come into your home, I mean, we still do have a Fourth Amendment. Last time I checked, and I got the Constitution in my hand right here. We still got it. I mean, just because you invite somebody into your home doesn't give you the right to go search everything about it. You need a warrant for that.
Right. That's kind of the way I felt too. And everybody that I talked to, they said, well, because you invited them in, they had the right to do whatever they want. And I was like, well, that doesn't seem right. I was like, you're not going to help me with this? And they're like, well, there's nothing we can do for this. So I was like, this is absolutely ridiculous. So I get transported up to Fort Collins to the Larimer County Jail up there. And I'm sitting in booking, and about an hour into sitting in the booking process, my husband shows up. So they did end up arresting him. I found out, even though we weren't supposed to be talking during that booking process, I found out from him that he did turn himself in, that he was actually nearby at that point in time when I had called him, but he was not releasing that information until he was ready to turn himself in. I was like, well, that was not fair to me. I was like, I'm your wife. I have a right to know what is going on with you and where you're at. I was like, whatever's going on with you, that's not fair. So I did find out later on that he was arrested on the charges for sexual assault, incest, and to this day, I'm not exactly sure what the incest is all about, because I always thought that the incest it had to do with something between people who are blood related, but according to them, it still counts as incest, and still to this day I'm not exactly sure, because when they were explaining it to me, I was just not understanding whatsoever, and they would not explain it to me to where I could understand. So there was actually 4 counts, but at the top of my head I can't remember what the other 2 counts were. I just know at this point in time it was incest and sexual assault on a child. I think the other one was a person of trust or something like that. They set his bail at $75,000, which I knew for a fact that he wouldn't get bailed out, because we don't have that type of money. Even if he had a bail bondsman, we still did not have the 10 or 15% to get him bailed out in that aspect. Wow. So roughly, I spent 51 days in jail for the unrelated traffic incident. I know that there was a court date that was held in May, shortly after, it was probably a couple weeks after I had been arrested and I'm sitting in jail, that I was told that I needed to be there, and I told the county jail that I needed to be there for that court date, but they said that they had no record of me needing to be there. But for some reason, they had it set up to where my husband had to be at this court date in May. So I wasn't understanding how he had to be there and they had record of that, but I had to be there and the jail had no record of me needing to be there. So the only person that was able to represent me was my attorney in that point in time. I was not able to go into court and tell the magistrate of how this incident came about or anything else like that. So I was not able to do any kind of defending of myself. Right. I didn't even really get to talk to my attorney much before that first court date to explain to him my situation of everything. So he kind of went into that a little bit blinded, as much as pretty much anybody else would have in my situation. So really, I didn't get the proper representation at that point in time. So I was released on June 1st of 2012, and I get out, and, of course, I had lost my house and everything that I owned because, 51 days is 2 months of jail time. There's no money coming in, so we're not able to pay the rent or pay the bills or anything else like that. So I get released, and I get to go to my sister's 1-bedroom apartment. So as soon as I was released, I immediately called the caseworker who had been assigned to my case, and I got to talk to her one time while I was in jail to tell her the situation of what had happened. But she was not asking me the questions about what exactly had happened. She wanted to know specifically how long this was going on and why I did nothing to report it. I was like, I don't know what you're talking about not reporting it. I took her to the doctor on January 31st, and we did an examination, and the doctor comes back with this conclusion that there is no trauma or anything else like that. So I was like, I don't understand why you're coming up with this accusation that I did not report it, because taking her to the doctor, in my assumption, is making a report.
Now, since we're on this, now what wasn't your friend? Her daughter was being sexually abused, or had made allegations of sexual abuse. So whatever happened to that case? Was that a real case too, or?
I'm not too sure because I'm no longer friends with this girl. After this whole thing went down of my daughter being taken, I felt as if she had some way had something to do with this, and I'm not understanding how or why, but I truly believe that she had something to do with this because the detective was involved in her case, and then all of a sudden the detective is coming to me and now is taking my daughter away from me for sexual allegations. And, so I'm not exactly understanding how all of this is happening. All I know is it stems from one case, and then the next thing I know, my daughter's being taken. So at this point in time, all I know is that she still has custody of her children. I don't know how the case had ended with her, but I know that she still does have custody of her children. I do honestly believe that her children were being sexually abused. She was a very heavy drinker. She was constantly always drinking. There were times that she would be drinking and driving with her kids in the car. She would have multiple men over at her house while she was drinking. Even though she was married, she would still have multiple men over at her house. So I honestly believed that there was something going on with her children. And I've even witnessed her abusing her children physically. And I don't know how she still has custody of her children.
Now, was your daughter ever over at her house playing with her daughter?
Yes, she was, but she was always with me. I was always present during that time. There was never a time where my daughter would go over there without me present. I was always there with her.
Well, that's what I was trying to get at. If there was, sexual abuse going on in that household,
right.
And if she was over there alone, playing with, I could see where that could happen. So.
Right.
Okay, so. Where are we right now? I mean, this has been 3 years. Do you have any visitations at all? You get a chance?
I did have visitations weekly with my daughter from June 17th, 2012 is when I got to see her for the first time, and it was for 2 hours. So they made that consistent that I would get weekly visits with her for 2 hours, and that they would generally be on a Friday. And so that lasted up until October 18th of 2014, and then all of a sudden they came to a stop. So I have not seen my daughter since October 18th, when they tried to claim that my daughter was having meltdowns and that she was becoming violent and she was threatening her biological father and his family. In August of 2014, they had decided that they were going to move my daughter in with her biological father. Him and his parents had visitations throughout that time period, but June of 2013 is when him and his parents decided that they could not continue on with being a possibility for a placement for her because that they could not handle her tantrums. And I'm trying to understand what tantrums they're talking about, because when I had full custody of her, I've never witnessed her to really have, anything unusual outside of a normal 8-year-old not getting what they want type deal.
Right.
So the tantrums that they're talking about, I was like, that's not my daughter that you're talking about, because she's never exhibited anything like this before. They're trying to claim that she threatened to kill herself if she did not get to go home. They claimed that she had threatened his family with a knife, and at one point in time, before June of 2013, that they had an overnight visit with her, and she got so horrible with a tantrum that they said that they ended up having to take her to the emergency room because she was so out of control. And I was thinking to myself, once again, this is not my daughter that you're talking about. So him and his parents decided to take her back to the foster home that she was staying in, and said that they could no longer be a placement. Well, apparently that same year, during the Christmas time when she went on vacation from school, she started to have visitations with his parents again, and I was like, well, I'm not understanding why you're having visitations with them again. And I tried to keep it to where I wasn't going to get into trouble for asking her these types of questions, because I wasn't allowed to ask her these types of questions. So I was trying to phrase it in a way that I wasn't going to get into trouble, and she couldn't really understand what I was getting at, so I kind of just dropped it right there. But I brought it to my attorney. I was like, why is she having visitations with them when they claim that they can't handle her tantrums and all this type of stuff? So
why is she over there anyway? Wasn't your husband didn't have the girl's biological father? He didn't have anything to do with her growing up. So why would they even? That doesn't even make any sense, and this happens all the time. This didn't make any sense to me either. I explained that to the first. I'm on my third caseworker as of almost 3 years now. So the very first caseworker, I explained to her, I was like, he has not been a part of her life at all during the course of the 8 years. I was like, she had maybe 10 visits with him, but she didn't know that that was her father. And the caseworker turned to me and said, well, your daughter does know that he is her father. I was like, well, how does she know that? Because I have not told her that. And she goes, well, she just assumed that he was. I was like, don't tell me that. Don't sit here and lie to me, because I know for a fact what my daughter knows and what my daughter doesn't know. So you can't sit there and tell me that. So the caseworker, it just seemed as my very first caseworker, she was constantly lying to me. And I have to put this in here that shortly after I was released from jail, the caseworker had called me and told me that my daughter had told her that my husband physically raped her, and that he stuck his, pardon my language here, he stuck his dick inside of her and raped her. I was like, what are you talking about? I was like, I have doctor's proof right here that he did not do this to her, that there was no trauma. I was like, if there was any kind of trauma done, the doctor would have noticed that, regardless of the time frame that it happened. The doctor would have seen some kind of trauma, because let me tell you, my husband is a very big man. This man weighed over 250 pounds. My daughter's 8 years old, and she weighed roughly around 50, 60 pounds. If that did happen where there was any real penetration, first of all, your daughter would have been in so much pain she wouldn't have been able to walk. There would have been excessive bleeding. There would have been internal damage.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? I mean, she would have had to have been hospitalized. You would have known that there would have been excessive bleeding. There would have been, internal injuries. It would have been noticeable. You would have been able to notice it.
Exactly. And I told the caseworker that. I was like, there is no evidence pointing that there was any rape. And I told her, I was like, you have to realize I was a stay-at-home mom. I did the laundry, I did the cooking, I did the cleaning, I did everything. I was homeschooling my daughter at that point in time. So I was like, I know everything that was going on inside my home. So you cannot sit there and tell me that this is true. And she goes, well, it doesn't matter. The doctor's examination does not matter. She's still saying that she was raped. I was like, excuse me? You have proof right here that she was not raped.
Well, see, proof isn't evidence. It's what they say is evidence. I mean, this is unbelievable. I mean, where do these people get this audacity to just make up accusations? And you know that word that you used earlier, that was put into her head. That was them talking. That wasn't your daughter talking. It couldn't have been.
I do know that. Yeah, because I know my daughter. She does. I am the type of person that I watch very carefully of what I say. I do have my mishaps, and I do say, an appropriate word every so often, but it's not like as if, I'm really, always thinking about what I'm saying. But generally, I do think about it because I know that kids do repeat things, and so you do have to be very careful as to what you're saying. And so I was always careful, and, every time my husband would be watching something on TV and I didn't think it was appropriate, I told him he needed to either go in the other room or change the channel. And there were times, he would say something that was inappropriate, and I'd look at him and be like, babe, you need to watch what you're saying. And we're like, we have a child right here. Of course, we all have those mishaps. I have to admit to that, but it was nothing as to something that I should be very concerned about. I'm a very cautious parent. I've always been the type of parent, when I had her, I was 17 years old, so I was very overly protective. The type of neighborhood that we lived in, it wasn't the greatest neighborhood. We've had SWAT down the street before on many occasions. So whenever she wanted to go outside and play, I would have to be outside with her, or she would have to be in a distance to where I can look out the window and see that she's doing okay. The only time that she was allowed to go anywhere without me being with her was to my sister's house, because I knew that she would be safe with my sister. Anywhere else other than school, I had to be present for. I did not feel very comfortable with the kids that was around our neighborhood. I told her, I was like, if you want to play with those kids, they need to come over here, because none of the kids wanted to take me over to their house and introduce me to their parents. So I told my daughter, I was like, if you want to play with these kids, they need to come over here and play with you, not you go over there. So I was that type of overly protective parent.
Right. That's good.
I would think so.
We need a few more parents like that,
Right.
That's the problem. I mean, it seems like the better the parent, the worse the parent is, the less CPS is going to get involved. The better parent that you are, that's what they don't like. They don't like the fact that you're a good parent, because, see, now they are the government. Now I do know, I know a lot of people think I'm a conspiracy theorist. I'm not. I go by the evidence, and I do know the government is doing everything they can to separate the families. They can't have total control over the children unless they separate it from the parents. So if you're a good parent, well, the children aren't going to listen to them. They're going to listen to you, and that's what they're trying to do. That's why they're trying to separate you. That's what they're doing. I know what they're doing. I believe in that New World Order, whatever you want to call it, sustainable development. It's all, they got a million names to it. Well, part of the New World Order is to break up the family unit. They consider the family unit as unsustainable. That right there just doesn't make any sense. If it wasn't for the family unit, the human being would have never evolved into the species that we are today. That's why we are as big as we are, because the family unit. Without the family, I mean, animals have families, for God's sakes. All animals do. I mean, it's just part of life. So now, with your husband, are you still are you finally divorced, or are you guys back together, or how did all that end up?
We have been separated pretty much during the entirety of this case. When he was released from jail with the charges having been dismissed by the prosecuting attorney, saying that they did not have a credible witness, he spent 7 months in jail fighting these charges against him. He spent 7 months fighting that. They released him.
7 months in jail?
Yes, 7 months in jail. They finally.
There was no court. There was nothing. They just threw him in jail for 7 months, and there were no charges filed, and there was no trial.
There was no trial, but he did attend a few court hearings with with once again another public attorney. I have to admit, he did have a very good public attorney outside of the regular DNN attorney. He had two separate attorneys. So the criminal one, the criminal public defender that he had, she was doing everything that she possibly could to to prove his innocence because she believed that he was innocent. I had talked to her on several occasions throughout this case because I wanted to know, what was going on during the time that he was in jail. I wanted to know every little detail so that way I could be prepared for any time something comes up, I can be prepared for it. So, of course, they had their usual court dates, and finally in November, the prosecuting attorney had told his attorney that they were dismissing the charges because they did not have a credible witness.
And here you are, you're separated. Now,
yes.
why would they still need to keep your daughter away from you if the so-called abuser was not even in the house?
That I do not understand either. The only thing that they keep telling me is that I knew all about it because supposedly in the CAC interview, they told her that I was a witness to it and that I knew everything that was going on and that I told her not to tell anybody what Daddy was doing to her. I was like, excuse me, why would I tell my own daughter not to tell anybody of what was happening to her? Why would I tell her that? And they still, to this day, cannot tell me why I would say something like that. They can't even tell me how I was a witness to it. All they keep telling me was that I was a witness to it. And I was like, please explain to me, how did I witness this? Because I would like to know, because if this happened right in front of me, do you really think that I would have done absolutely nothing about it? I'm the type of person, and I told this to all 3 caseworkers, that if I knew that he was doing something like this, I would have killed him myself and gone to prison, a happy woman doing so.
Well, why? Here's another thing. I mean, the very moment that you found out that your daughter had made the accusation that she was inappropriately touched, you immediately went to the doctor. Now, why would a parent who was knowingly allowing her daughter to be raped and inappropriately touched, why would you take your daughter to the hospital and try to find out if she was actually inappropriately touched or raped? I mean, that doesn't. I mean that right there. I mean, that right there is enough to say, okay, well, we've got a good parent here. But I mean, again, common sense, logic.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I'm thinking, and that's exactly what I told my attorney as well. I was like, if this was going on and I knew that it was going on, why would I have taken her to the doctor? Because if I didn't want this to be exposed, I wouldn't have taken her to the doctor. And he goes, well, I know exactly what you're saying, but they're still saying that you witnessed this. I'm like, please explain to me how I witnessed this, because still to this day I do not know.
Yeah, it sounds like to me that they put this in your daughter's head. They told her what to say. Actually, she probably didn't say anything. They just probably told you that she said that.
Well, I finally got the CAC interview 8 months after the case had started. So it took them 8 months to get me a copy of the entire interview. Okay, and so the entire time I'm watching this interview, I'm listening very closely as to what the lady is saying and what my daughter's responses are. And I noticed that throughout the entire interview that if my daughter did not answer the way this lady was wanting her to, she would continue to ask the same question until my daughter's answer had changed. So throughout the course of this interview, it was asked how many times this had happened to my daughter. She said at one point in time that it was 3 times. Then she said it was 5 times. And then another time she said it was 1 million times that it had happened. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, this doesn't make any sense. I know that children this young of age, they don't really have a timeline of, things happening, but this does not make sense. I mean, if this was truly happening, you would kind of know, in a sense, how many times that this had happened. And what is strange as well is they're trying to claim that it had happened 2 years prior to me taking my daughter in for an examination. And I'm thinking to myself, even if it had been 2 years prior to this happening, there still would have been some kind of scarring and damage done to my daughter. And again, I would have noticed if there were some kind of damage done to her by, this man being this big and my daughter being this small, it would have been obvious that something was going on. And
right, you would have seen blood. There would have been blood in her underwear. There would have been blood on her bed. She wouldn't have been able to walk. She would have been recluse. She would have.
Right.
I mean, it would have been blatantly obvious. Blatantly obvious.
Exactly, and they're trying to claim that it happened in my bedroom. I'm like thinking to myself, this makes absolutely no sense. You know, you're claiming that this happened in my bedroom, that it happened, that this happened, and all this type of stuff. And I'm like, you guys are not making any sense here. I don't get it. How do you come up with this type of stuff? And another thing about excuse me. Another thing about the interview was there was 2 discs to that interview. Because of the length of the time, obviously, it went from one DVD to the next. And I noticed that after the second hour of this interview going on, during the time that I had told you that my daughter and the interviewer had come down to get my daughter a snack, I noticed that when they had, through the interview, that when they had entered the room from them getting a snack, you don't see them entering the room. You see the video starting back up. So you don't see them coming into the room and then getting back into the interview. You just see it starts right back up. So where's the piece from when they left the room to them entering the room again? Where is that piece of interview?
Well, that's on the cutting room floor. That's been edited.
Yeah.
Oh, that's just, I mean, so far, I can't tell you how many crimes that I have heard that this police department has just committed, and CPS and everybody else involved in it. Now, did your husband blame you for this? Did he have any extra animosity towards you because of this? I mean, I can see where it'd be natural, but I mean...
I have noticed, you know, after the time that he, you know, even during the time that he was in jail, you know, he was writing me letters and I was responding back to him. And then after he got out of jail, you know, he explained to me that, you know, the charges had been dismissed. And, you know, I was thinking to myself, like any other person would think, okay, well, the charges have been dismissed, so that means you're innocent, that this truly did not happen, especially if they're saying that there's no credible witness, because if you know, obviously the only witness involved is my daughter, so if, you know, there's no credible witness, then that means they must know that this is not true. You know, this is what I'm thinking to myself.
Right.
So after he gets out of jail, yes, I admit that we had, you know, we try to, you know, repair things and try and, you know, continue our marriage on and, you know, make things, you know, right as possible and try and fight to get my, you know, my daughter back and to have the family that we had before, you know. So, you know, all during this time, you know, yes, there was some animosity. There were times that we would get into an argument and, you know, he would just be like, well, you know, if this didn't happen, if you weren't friends with her, this wouldn't have happened. I was like, how was I supposed to know that being friends with this girl was going to lead me into getting my daughter taken away and you being accused of such a crime as this? I'm not supposed to know that. You can't expect that type of stuff. Just like you can't expect that the next person that you walk down the street with is not some kind of murderer or serial killer or something like that. You don't know this type of stuff. Right. So yes, you know, throughout that time period, yes, there had been some animosity, and shortly
that's
after,
only natural. I mean, you know, if it would have happened to you, you would have, you know, human nature would have done that, and that's another one of their tricks. They love to get the parents to turn on each other. They love that.
Right.
Oh, they're masters at that.
Of course, and one of the stipulations of, you know, for me to get my daughter back, you know, besides the treatment plan that I had to adhere to, which, you know, I did it, you know, not only to prove to them that I am innocent, but to get my daughter back and to do whatever it took to get my daughter back. You know, I was willing to do whatever I possibly needed to do. They said that, you know, we weren't allowed to have any type of a relationship. Well, at that point, when he was released from jail, I didn't know that there was, you know, they were going to sit there and say, well, you're not allowed to have a relationship with him or anything else like that. Yeah, we did start up a relationship. but we didn't live together. But shortly after he was released from jail, as any married couple would do, they would spend some time together. I ended up pregnant, and this is where my son comes into play. So I got pregnant shortly after he gets released, and I didn't tell the department about my pregnancy because I was afraid that they were going to try and take my baby away from me as they did with my daughter. Right. So I really was quite hesitant about telling them of my pregnancy. Well, they did eventually find out that I was pregnant, and they found out roughly about 2 weeks before I went into have him. The caseworker, my first caseworker, had called down to the hospital to see if I had the baby yet. And I was like, well, I'm not understanding where they're coming up with this information that I was pregnant. I just tried to hide it as best as I can. And I'm not no skinny person, so I was able to hide the pregnancy as best as I possibly could. But somehow the very first caseworker had found out that I was pregnant, so she called into the hospital to find out if I had that baby or not. And it was during the time that I was in the hospital, giving birth to him. The next day I found out that the department knew that I had the baby and that they were going to want to come out and do an investigation and to see if the baby was going to be safe and whatnot. They left my son in my care. They came out, I want to say, about 2 weeks after my son was born. They came out and did an investigation, and they informed me that my husband was not allowed around my son. And I was like, well, I'm not understanding why. And they're like, because he's a predator, because he sexually abused your daughter. And I was like, but he was dismissed of the charges by the prosecuting attorney. Well, that doesn't matter. He's still a predator, and he sexually abused your child. So he is not allowed around your son. I was like, and at that point in time, I broke down. I was like, are you going to take my son away from me? And she was like, no, we're not going to do that. Unless we find that there is any reason to take your son away from him, as if you are going to continue a relationship with your husband, then yes, we would have to take him away, but you have to end all relationship with him. So as of 2 weeks after my son was born, I was not allowed to have any kind of relationship with him whatsoever. They took their sweet-ass time in giving him supervised visitations with my son. And so I want to say it was probably 6 months after my son had been born is when they decided that there is no longer a safety concern regarding my son and that there was no need to have a case open. My husband only got, I want to say, 4 visitations with my son before they cut him off from having visitations. So he really only got to see him 4 times during that time period. But I have to admit, I did try to, keep him informed on what was going on with his son because I felt that he had a right to know what was going on with his son. Oh, absolutely. So,
and if you're such a bad parent that you can't have your daughter because you have your daughter in this so-called unsafe environment, well then why would they think that you would only have your daughter in an unsafe environment but not your son? You see what I'm saying? This is all arbitrary. It's arbitrary and it's baseless. And if you're allowed to have your son, why can't you have your daughter if the so-called perpetrator is no longer in the house?
Right, and that is what I've been asking them as well over the course of the last year and a half. I was like, I don't understand how you can sit there and tell me that I'm a good mother to my son and that there's no safety issue with my son, but you're sitting here telling me that I'm not a good fit for my daughter and that you're concerned that I can't keep her safe. Well, doesn't that mean that I can't keep my son safe either? And they're like, well, that's not what this is about. This is about the fact that you knew what was going on with your daughter and you did not report it. I was like, that is bull crap, and you know it because I did report it. I took her to the doctor as soon as I found out someone was touching her. And they're like, well, you knew that your husband was doing it.
Yeah, exactly. What's to say that you're not, if you're going to, this isn't Cinderella. You're not going to pick and choose of which one of your children you're going to abuse or allow to be abused. If you're a bad mother, you're a bad mother to all your children, not just one or two.
Exactly.
That's crazy. That's crazy. That's insanity.
Yeah.
Oh.
It is absolutely ridiculous. And at this point in time, as of about 2 weeks ago, I received an email from the caseworker, actually from my attorney, stating that they want to give temporary custody to my daughter's biological father. She's been living with him and his second wife and their 2 children for since August 9th of 2014, but he has not been granted temporary custody or permanent custody, nothing like that. She's just been living with him. This is also a man who has 5 other children that he does not take care of, 2 of which are very much in question because nobody truly knows whether or not he is the father of 2 of those children. But there are still 5 children that are in question that he does not take care of. I also speak with his ex-wife quite regularly that he has 2 children with, and she's informed me that she's had a restraining order placed on him because he tried multiple times while they were married to rape her. He's also been very aggressive with her. He's been threatening towards her. He was even stalking her at one point in time. And I informed the all 3 of the caseworkers of this and my attorney of this, and I've also informed this to the courts that this is the type of man that you are allowing my daughter to live with. I was like, when I met this man, I was 16 years old and he was 24 years old, and he continued to pursue a relationship with me, and he was very manipulative. He was sexually abusive towards me, and that's how I ended up getting pregnant with my daughter, was because he was sexually abusive. I was like, you really want to place my daughter in the hands of this man that is known for this type of stuff, and yet you're sitting here telling me that I'm not safe with my own daughter.
No, I can't tell you how many cases, how many of you parents that I have spoken to where this has happened, where they take the child away from a loving, caring environment, and they try to throw it into the father that has nothing to do with the child, never even knew, a lot of them, the father never even met the child, and they're abusive. Right. And that's why the marriage or the relationship split up in the first place. And they immediately love to take that child. They cannot stand a child in a loving, caring environment. They have to find an abusive environment to put the child, either with the abusive biological father or the foster care. Now, foster care is not fostering, and there is no care. Foster care is one of the most dangerous places that you could ever put your child.
Right.
Unbelievable. I can't believe these people do this. Now, what were some of the they made you go through, I would imagine, psych evals, these parenting classes. What was some of the nonsense that they make you parents go through? What do they make you do?
The treatment plan that had been ordered during the 51 days that I spent in jail, I didn't get to really agree or disagree with any of it. But the only things that was on the treatment plan for myself was I had to do therapeutic or individual therapy and parenting classes. I also had to maintain contact with the department and also maintain my regular visitations with my daughter, which I saw absolutely no problem with. So when I was finally released from jail, and I spoke with the caseworker, I told her that upon receiving the treatment plan, I was like, I'll do whatever it takes to prove to you that I want my daughter back. And I agreed that I'll do the individual therapy and I'll do the parenting classes. So she got it to set up to where that they would pay for all of these things because I could not afford to do it myself. So she got it all set up to where I would do individual therapy through Touchstone, which they also the Child Protective Services partners with Touchstone Therapy. She got that all set up, and I was told that I needed to do a minimum of 12 sessions with the individual therapist on top of doing 8 weeks of parenting classes. I went to every single session for both the individual therapy and the parenting classes, and I completed both of them successfully. Upon a few months after I completed that both of those courses, I was informed that the work that I did with the individual therapist was not sufficient. I was like, what do you mean it's not sufficient? I did all 12 weeks working with this individual therapist. Well, you didn't address the concerns that we had. I was like, what do you mean I didn't address the concerns? What concerns were you particularly looking for? And she would not give me a straight answer as far as that was concerned. So I emailed the individual therapist that I worked with, and I told her of the situation. So she typed up a letter, and she had it sent to me, and I gave a copy of it to both caseworkers. At the what I mean by both caseworkers is the first caseworker had been promoted. And let me throw this in real quick, that she was promoted because she works high-profile cases. And my case is not a high-profile case, as you can tell. But she works high-profile cases. So, everybody's so proud of the work that she's done, that she's been able to put families in jail that's, known for the abuse, and they're guilty of the abuse. So she got promoted to being supervisor. So the second caseworker that had been assigned to me, so I gave a copy of this letter to both of the caseworkers. And I told them, I was like, look, I talked to her about your concerns, that I did not address the concerns that you guys have. She's saying in this letter that I did address all the concerns, and that there was no further need to continue on with the therapy at this point in time, because we're not sure where you guys are looking to go or what else needs to be addressed in this at this point in time. So of February of 2013, I was assigned another individual therapist. I worked with this individual therapist for 25 weeks. That was pretty much the good course of the year that I worked with this individual therapist. And once again, I addressed every single concern. I told him how this case came about, what my concerns were, all that type of stuff. And by the end of it, we were transitioning from the second caseworker into the third caseworker. And the individual therapist that I was working with, he was constantly in contact with the department trying to figure out, are we addressing every single one of their concerns? Are we talking about everything that needs to be discussed? And every week, we would just sit down and discuss, what is the department saying, that they're not telling me, that they're telling you, that type of deal. So we would sit down and we would hash that out. The individual therapist finally said to me one day, he goes, at this point in time, I don't know where we can go from here. You've done everything that you needed to do. You wrote the clarification letter regarding your son, because when I was pregnant with my son, I was not allowed to tell my daughter that I was pregnant with him. So I had to keep that a secret from my daughter. So eventually,
that doesn't even make any sense. Why
that
would they not allow?
Sense to me. They did not. I don't know. No, they did not give me a reason. The only thing that I could come to the conclusion about was they were so adamant that my daughter was not coming back home to me, and they told me this on many occasions, that she was not coming back home to me. And I was like, well, you don't have the right to say that. That is completely up to the judge to tell me whether or not I get my daughter back. You can't tell me that you're not going to give her back to me. So the only conclusion that I can come up with is the fact that they did not want me to tell her, because they were so adamant that she was not coming back home to me, that they didn't want to get her hopes up that she was going to have a little brother or a little sister or anything else like that, which really upset me, because I felt that she needed to know that she was going to have a little brother. I mean, because throughout the time that I had custody of her, she would always ask me if she could have a little sister, and I told her, I was like, at that point in time, it was not possible. I didn't think it was going to be possible for me to have another baby. And, it kind of happened, and I was not expecting it, especially not during this case. Right. And so I was told that I needed to write a clarification letter to my daughter explaining to her that she was going to be a big sister. Well, I found out shortly after I wrote that, after doing 3 revisions of that letter, because everything that I had put in there, the therapist that my daughter was working with kept telling my individual therapist that this was not sufficient. I needed to take this sentence out. I needed to take that sentence out because it was just absolutely ridiculous that nothing that I put in there was good enough. So I pretty much had to make it a very short letter explaining to her that yes, I was pregnant. I was not allowed to tell you at that particular time, but you're going to be a big sister, and that was pretty much it. I was not allowed to tell her that. They forced me to keep this a secret from her. The individual therapist that she had worked with would not comply with any demands from the court and my attorney to give me any kind of information as to what was going on with my daughter, whether she was exceeding in therapy or if she was having troubles in therapy. Still to this day, she has not released any information regarding my daughter.
I've noticed the CPS, I mean, they now, they're police officers. They have the right to, they're judges, they're doctors. These people, CPS have made, well, I don't want to say the recommendations, but it's, I guess, mandatory to put children, which they have deemed, because see, they're all doctors, to have this bogus ADHD, which doesn't exist. And
right.
they have demanded that the child be put on drugs. Well, they're a social worker. They've had,
right.
25 hours of training. And that's it. And all of a sudden now you're a detective. You come to the conclusion that there's been physical abuse. You're a doctor. They know they need drugs. You're a psychiatrist. You're this. You're that. You're the judge. They're everything. I don't understand how CPS has this much power. Judges are afraid of them. The police are afraid of them. Everybody is afraid of the CPS. I'm not. I'm not afraid of these bastards at all. I could care less. But where these people get the audacity and how the judges allow them to do this is just absolute mind-boggling. And when every single one of these visitations I've heard from every single one of these parents, when they go in there, they're not allowed, and like you said, you can't say to your daughter that you're pregnant. They're not allowed to tell their children, you're going to come home someday. You're not allowed to do that. And if you say that, immediately, boom, the interview is cut off and you lose your visitation rights, because they don't want their child to think that they're coming home. They're immediately trying to separate you from them. I mean, I don't know how these people go to bed at night knowing that they're destroying families. I mean, these are human beings, for God's sakes. I don't even have any kids. But this pisses me off, because if they can do it to them, you do that to one American, you're doing it to all of us. And you're doing it to me. You're not only doing it to me, you're doing it to the entire community, the entire country. That's what's going on here. And American people need to wake up, because it's going to happen to you as well. And don't stop with children. The elderly, and I got a story. I did a 26-year-old man. He's a big game hunter in Alaska. He gives these tours. If you want to go hunt a big bear or any kind of big game, you go to this guy. Well, they took him. A 26-year-old man. And they put him on drugs in a psych ward. His parents, he couldn't have any visitation with any friends or anybody. I mean, these people are out of control. I mean, absolutely out of control. I don't know how they get away with this. I really don't. I honest to God, I don't know how to go to bed at night knowing that. And you're right that your first caseworker. Well, see, they get bonuses, and all this money comes from the taxpayers. People don't understand. I mean, this is taxpayer money. You are paying the government to kidnap your children. That's what's going on. Now, do you have to pay any kind of alimony or of any kind, or child support? I mean, because
they're telling me that I have to pay child support for the time that she was in foster care. So from April 2012 until August 9th of 2014, they're telling me that I owe them $5,000 in child support for the foster care fees. And they know that I've been unemployed for the last year and a half because I went on maternity leave with my son, and by the time that I was ready to go back to work, things got crazy with my daughter's case once again. So that interrupted me going back to work because, I have to be available to go to work. And if I can't be available to go to work because, the case wants me to do this and this and this and this, how am I supposed to go to work and make money and pay for all this stuff? I don't understand.
They don't care. They just want the money. That's what this is all about. It's all about the pay it. Guess what? You got to go to jail now.
Yeah.
And they get bonuses. Imagine that. You get a bonus. You get a bonus for separating the most children from families. I mean, first of all, this kind of job. This is not a bonus incentive kind of job. That's not the purpose of social work. It's just not the purpose. There should be no bonuses whatsoever. You don't get a bonus for that. Bonuses are for sales. I have a lot of sales. So I do know if you sell enough cars, or you sell enough televisions, or you sell enough this or that, hats or shoes or whatever the hell you're selling, okay, fine. The company says, okay, you made us a lot of money, we'll give you a bonus. But to steal kids, you don't get a bonus for that. You don't get promoted for that. But they do, and it's very expensive. I mean, these kids. I mean, if you've got an autistic kid, now your daughter doesn't have any special needs at all, right? She's
none.
Okay. Well, some of these autistic kids, I mean, they get upwards of over $30,000 a month that they are taking from the taxpayer. A month. I mean, there are people out there that don't even make $30,000 a year, but they are taking $30,000 a month. Why do you need $30,000 a month plus all of their medications and their medical?
Right.
Now, I mean, $30,000 a month for one child. That's one child. Well, there's over 450,000 kids in CPS care right now in this country. If that's the real number, that's the only number that they tell you about. Some states you don't have to really report as much, but I mean that is just. Your story just really irritates me. I mean, I know it irritates you, but I mean, it's sickening. I mean,
while you're on the subject of that, the whole medications type thing, I want to inform you that towards the last few visits that I had with my daughter before they completely cut me off, my daughter informed me that she was taking a couple different multivitamins a day, and I asked her about that.
Yeah, they're not vitamins.
Yeah, I was like, what kind of vitamins are you taking? She goes, well, one of them is for my allergies, because she does suffer from seasonal allergies, so that I can understand. And she said the other one, she goes, I don't know what the other one is that I'm taking. I was like, why don't you know what it is? And she goes, well, I don't know. It's something to help me keep me awake during the day. And I was like, what do you mean to help you keep you awake during the day? And she goes, because I get really tired. And I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. And shortly thereafter is when they completely cut off my visits. And I told my attorney at one point in time, I was like, you need to put in a request to have my daughter tested to see if they're drugging her of some sort. And then shortly after that, my visits get cut off. They're saying that her temper tantrums are getting worse and they're getting violent, and that they're due to these happen and they increase after she has a visit with me. And I'm like, I'm not understanding. And according to the caseworker, that she said that my daughter told her that she would continue to have these temper tantrums until she got to come home to me. I'm like thinking to myself, well, hello? Mm-hmm. My daughter has been telling you over and over and over again that she wants to come home to me. She tells me over and over and over again that she misses me and she wants to come home. And I've got letters from her and notes and drawings saying that I'm the best mother that she's had and she misses me and she wants to come back home to me. I don't understand. And I even have this one particular letter that she simply said, I don't care what they tell me about you. I still love you and want to come home.
See, they don't like that. That's why, and you brought up something that I was going to bring up earlier when you said she was having temper tantrums. Well, that does sound a little symptomatic of a lot of these drugs that they put on these kids. And they will do that because these drugs first of all, these drugs are very powerful and they're very dangerous. They shouldn't even be for adults, much less children. So there are a lot of adverse reactions that these drugs do create. And instead of taking them off the drugs, when they develop these adverse reactions, well, they just keep giving more drugs and more drugs and more drugs. that's what they're doing. I mean, this is.
Right.
I mean, this is just. I mean, this is just. I mean, this is. I mean, you can't. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. I mean,
No,
you can't.
really
You can't explain it. And it. I mean, I just get so incensed. I mean, I'm a talker. I never shut up. But this stuff gets me so irate that I don't even know how to even speak. I mean, I can only imagine what you, as the parent, is going through. I mean, I can only imagine, and that's all I can do. I mean, I would.
Right.
I've got to admit, I don't know how you parents keep your composure. I really don't. I know for a fact because I got a mother that's getting elderly. I got a grandmother now. She's 90-something. And I know it's only a matter of time before they try to do that crap with them. I'm going to go to jail. I'm going to go nuts. I'm just that kind of guy.
Right.
But you know, it's only a matter of time before they do this to the wrong family. Daddy comes downstairs with his shotgun, and
Right.
then all hell is going to break loose, and then it's going to make it even worse. I mean, I just can't see how these people don't understand what they are actually doing to human beings. Do they not see that these people are human? How do they not know this? To me, now, all that I have been told, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist, but what I've been told, and I do study serial killers. I'm weird. I study a lot of crazy stuff. But a sociopath doesn't feel any empathy. A serial killer has no idea what empathy is. They don't understand that their actions towards another human being is causing that human being pain and suffering. They don't understand that. Well, what CPS is doing and what the judges and the police and everybody else involved in this, school teachers, I mean, you name it. Obviously, they're psycho because they just simply don't understand the empathy. And if you did have empathy towards another human being, you would have never done that. They would have never. Nobody in the CPS or law enforcement or anybody that was connected to your case would have done that. They just wouldn't. Nobody would. I wouldn't do it. I couldn't do it. You know, unless it's a real abusive child, of course. But see, they don't like those. They don't like those real abusive children because they consider them damaged. They're not adoptable. CPS is not a child protection agency. They are an adoption agency. Have they threatened to or made any recommendations to have your daughter adopted? Because they love to do that. Have they even brought that up yet?
The only thing that they have told me was that their ultimate goal is to place her with either her biological father and his parents, or the next goal was to try and place her with another family member, which I told them on many occasions that there is no options for that. I was like, the only other family members that it would be an option for would be my sister, and she's not in a position where she can really care for my daughter. And on top of that, they're trying to claim that she knew all about the abuse as well, so she's not an option either. So I'm like, I don't understand how she can sit there and know about the abuse when all she told me was what my daughter had told her, which really wasn't much of anything, and I had her examined. And the only other family members that there would be, it would be my mother, and that's not an option either because my mother is addicted to drugs. She does not have a place of her own. I don't know if she has a full-time job or anything else like that. There's my aunt, but my aunt is not the mother type. I mean, yes, she's had visitations with my daughter, but she is not an option. I know that much. So they said that if they can't place her with her biological father and his parents, or if I don't complete the treatment plan successfully, then their next option is to do adoption. I was like, well, I've done everything that I'm supposed to do in this treatment plan. I've agreed to the divorce with my husband, and I want this divorce with my husband. I no longer want to be involved with him. And the conclusion I've come to this isn't just based on the case. It's based on the fact that he is not a very good man in some aspects. He does have an anger issue that he really truly needs to deal with. And I found out that he was having an affair on me with his first ex-wife. So, and I told him, I was like, I don't want any more to do with you. I just want to be done with this. And I've told them for almost 3 years now just to help me with the divorce. I don't have the money to do it on my own, so help me with this divorce process. So I've agreed to that, and still to this day, they will not help me with that divorce process.
So how old are you now?
I am 28 now.
Oh, okay. And how old is your son now? He's what? Just
my son is 19 months old.
19 months old. Okay. All right.
My daughter has only got to meet my son one time.
And you haven't seen your daughter since October, so that's been November, December, that's been almost 5 months now. Almost 6 months now.
Correct.
Is there any time frame where you have a visitation appointment?
No.
They haven't told you, and you keep asking them, and what do they do when you ask, when can I see my daughter? They just ignore you?
They don't give me an answer. They just keep telling me that I need to complete the treatment plan and I need to do it successfully, that I need to work with this, once again, another individual therapist in providing the answers that they want in regards to this entire case as to how I could allow this to happen to my daughter. And every time that I have this conversation with my attorney, he keeps telling me that the only thing that they are trying to do right now is they are trying to get me to admit to guilt, that I knew all about this. And I was like, I can't do that because it's not true. And even if it were true, you as an attorney are supposed to advise me as to how to go about that process. But I was like, it's not true. How am I supposed to go in there and admit to this stuff when it's not true? He goes, the only thing that they're looking for is to charge somebody criminally because that is what they do. And I was like, I understand that is what they do because I can see it clearly, but I cannot go in there and work with this individual therapist who only wants the same thing that the department wants and wants me to admit to guilt when I am not guilty. Right.
Now, do you have any communication at all with your first ex-husband? The biological father? Do you have any
Me and the biological father, we were never married because I was 16 when I got pregnant with her, and I had her.
What I'm saying, do you have any communication now with him?
No, I'm not allowed to have any communication with him. I actually do know of his physical address, but I'm not allowed to have any communication with him.
Well, the reason why I thought maybe if you had any communication, maybe you might be able to get your daughter at least on the phone and have a conversation. But, one thing that you said, now, he was 24 and you were 16 and you got pregnant at 17. Now, last time I checked, that was statutory rape.
Yes, it was. And my mother actually did want to press charges against him, but I convinced her not to because it was done and over with. I mean, you can't go back and do anything about that. I was like, I understand that you're angry that he left me to raise this child by myself, but there's nothing that we can really do about it. And, granted, thinking about it now, if we would have pressed charges after my daughter had been born, maybe that would have prevented her from being in his care now. But thinking about it, if that were the case, then they probably would have been moving forward towards adoption at this point in time if that were the case.
Right.
And that kind of is what scares me because, granted, they don't have proof and they don't have evidence, but still the simple fact of the matter is that they are trying to prove that they have a case and they're going to do whatever they possibly can to make this case go on as long as they possibly can. It scares me that they, if he was not in the picture even to this day, they would move towards adoption. And that's not fair to me because I still have that right to fight for my daughter. I keep telling that all the time. I have a right to fight for my daughter. You did not take my parental rights away from me. I have my rights to my daughter.
Absolutely. And there's no charges. You don't have any criminal charges against you.
No.
And the so-called perpetrator doesn't have any. So
no.
This is where my question is: how can they legitimately legitimately keep your child away from you based on one accusation. I mean, this just doesn't make any sense to me at all, and how they get away with it, and why these governors. I'm sorry, but governors do have power, and they can do something about it. Politicians can do something about it, but they're not going to. So this is going to be the war that the American people have to fight. We have to fight this war. We all have to stand up.
And that's where you're right, because I made a complaint to the head Department of Human Services. I made a complaint to the ombudsman. I actually had emailed two governors throughout this process, informing them of what was going on, trying to find somebody to help me in this process to fight to get my daughter back, to prove that there is innocence in this case. I've also contacted the ACLU here in Colorado, and every single one of them, except for the ACL, has all told me that there is nothing that they can do to help me because the department did everything correct.
Yeah. Yeah, because they're getting kickbacks. They're getting their palms greased too. Judges get kickbacks. Everybody's getting kickbacks, and then they wonder why we don't have enough taxes and we got to keep raising our taxes. Well, if you spend your money wisely, you won't have that problem. I mean, this is over a $100 billion with a B, a $100 billion business that is going on with CPS. $100 billion. I mean, that is an astronomical number. And then when you put the pharmaceutical industry into the mix, it's well over $1 trillion. That's a year. I mean, this is insane, the amount of money.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I swear to God, I'm going to lose it. I swear to God, I'm going to lose it. And if they do this to my parents, I swear to God, I'm going to go nuts. I'm going to go absolutely, I'm going to go to jail. I know it. So there was another question I was going to ask you on your hearing. Do you got a hearing coming up next? When's your next hearing?
My next court date, I believe, is March 19th.
So that's just... Now, what is that hearing going to be over? Are they trying to TPR you, which is to terminate your parental rights, or what's this hearing supposed to be about?
They have not mentioned anything about me losing my parental rights. All they keep talking about is moving towards her biological father getting temporary custody, and I believe that's what this hearing is about. I could be wrong, but I believe that's what it's about, because my attorney had said something about the fact that I object to it, and I told him recently, the last time I talked to him about 2 weeks ago, that he needs to put in a motion to have this moved to a district judge instead of the magistrate that we've been going in front of for the last almost 3 years, because every time that we go in front of the magistrate, she completely disregards everything that we have to say, and she only listens to the department and sides with the department. So I told him he needed to put in a motion to have this seen. Pretty much every court case that we have from here on out needs to be in front of a district judge.
Yeah, see what they do is they're just buying time. So they're going to have another hearing, and you're going to go into this hearing, and their CPS is going to tell the judge, how awful and rotten and terrible you are because you're a horrible human being. And then they're going to have another hearing, and that's just so they can get more money. They're making money off of your daughter. That's all they're doing.
Right.
And once they've made as much money as they possibly can, then there's only two choices. Either the child goes into adoption, or they say, okay, well, everything is fine. You're now a really good parent, so you can have your daughter back. But by the time you're going to get your daughter back, your daughter is not even going to remember who the hell you are. I mean, God.
And I've been told that this case can take up to 5 years.
Oh, yeah.
That they have up to 5 years to continue this case. And so far, we're already going on 3 years.
Unbelievable. And you haven't seen your daughter in 6 months. I mean, your daughter, I'm sorry, but she has got to be, confused is an understatement.
Right.
You know what I mean? I mean, at 8 years old when this happened to her, she's now, 11?
Yes.
She's got to be emotionally and psychologically at this point of just a mess. I mean, I can only imagine what I would be like at 8 years old if this happened to
Right.
me. I think most kids, most adults would be able to look back when they were 8 years old and if this happened to them. Of course, even if it would happen to me as an adult, I know I'd be an emotional wreck. I mean,
Right. The last time that I spoke with the caseworker and actually had a face-to-face conversation with her was back in December, and I had asked her point blank, how is my daughter doing? And she tells me that my daughter is doing just fine. I was like, well, what does that mean? And she would not elaborate on that at all. I finally got an email from her saying that the only concern that there is that she thinks you're mad at her because she hasn't been able to see you. And I was like, well, I was approved to write her a letter explaining to her why I was not able to see her. Why has she not received that letter? And the caseworker said that she did not know why, and she does not know what letter I'm talking about. And I'm like, seriously? Mm-hmm. I was told to send it to you or send it to my attorney, and my attorney was going to be sending it to you. So why you did not get this letter is beyond my comprehension.
They got the letter all right. They rolled it up and smoked it. It went straight into the trash can. They got the letter.
So at this point in time, I don't know how my daughter's doing. Supposedly she's doing just fine is what she keeps telling me. I don't know what fine means. I really don't. I mean, that's a whole wide variety right there.
Unbelievable. And you have no way of getting any communication, no phone, no letter, nothing. I mean, I can only imagine what you're going through. And we're running out of time here. I didn't realize it, but I just looked at the clock here. But, you know, I really feel sorry for you. I don't know what more I can do to help, but if there is anything that you think that I might be able to help you out with, I don't care how small it is. Don't worry about it. How big it is, doesn't matter. I mean, if there's something I can do, I help you families out all the time. Don't ever hesitate to call on me. Because if I can just make up a Facebook post, you know, help you out with your hearing, try to get people to, you know, show up at your hearing, show up support, which is another thing. And I do blame the American people for this. I got to. I'm sorry, but, you know, there's enough bad press out there that people are aware of what's happening. The problem is they don't acknowledge it. Because as soon as you acknowledge that there's a problem, that means you're going to have to get your fat ass off the couch and turn off that stupid Kim Kardashian, put down those bags of Cheetos, and actually roll up your sleeves and actually go to work and do something. But people don't want to do that. They don't want to get involved until it happens to them. And then when it happens to them, then they're the first ones, and they're screaming and throwing fits the loudest because nobody's coming to their aid. Well, you know, maybe if you came to somebody else's aid, maybe somebody would be more inclined to come to your aid. And again, this is an American problem. We have to stick together on this. And this has nothing to do with color, with race, religion, or any of that stuff. We are human beings. We got one race in this country, and that's it, an American race. We don't have colors. There's no such thing as African American, Chinese American, Liechtensteinian American. No. We're Americans, period. And we're human beings. And it's high time that these people started realizing that you people are human. You have feelings. You have actual blood running through your veins. You've got a heart. You've got a brain. You've got a mind. I mean, this is what really confuses me. I just don't understand how these people could have that little empathy towards you people. I just don't get it. But we're almost out of time here. They're going to cut me off. Lacy, I really want to thank you for coming on here tonight and telling your story. I know it's very difficult. I really feel sorry for you. And again, you know how to get a hold of me. If there's something, I don't care how big or how small, you think I can help you out with. You know, if I can, I will. If I can't, well, then I'm going to find somebody that can. That's just the way it is. So.
I definitely appreciate it, and I appreciate you letting me come on the air to tell my story, because hopefully somebody out there will hear my story, and maybe they can help point me in the direction of where I can go to get help, what I can do next. I mean, any little thing will help me in any regards to getting my daughter back.
Well, here's one thing that you can do, is never, ever, ever give up. Don't ever give up. The very moment that you give up, they got you. And that's what it takes right there. stand up and fight. All right, I want to thank everybody in the chat room here tonight. I know we had Southern Sense, we had Iggy, we had a lot of people on your smartphones, and there's going to be a lot of people downloading later. I really want to thank everybody for listening, and we will see you back here tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Goodbye, everybody.